I've been Pender County Library Director since October 1985, so I'm coming on my 30th anniversary, and still going strong, and plan to keep on going. And I count myself really blessed to have spent my professional working career in my home region. You know, so many people have to move around in this kind of job, and for upward advancement. But I've been so happy to be able and felt so blessed to be where I am in this region. And it has, to become the steward of the Dallas Herring Collection is one of the highest callings, I think, of my career. A high privilege, very high privilege that has it's been a wonderful surprise late in my career, I guess, compared to when I started. But it's one that has just given new purpose and interest to continuing, and with just great goals and aspirations for the future. But the future of the collection is not dependent on a person anymore. It's really part of an institution now, and I think the future is quite secure in that. You know, I really understand and respect the disappointment many of you all must have felt when the collection, of course, left Rose Hill. When Dr. Herring died, I contacted Bob Herring at that time to see what the future was. He explained to me, and he also explained that there were some questions, you know, how long it could stay. And I coming back and reconnecting back in a couple years ago, I found that Sonny and Horace and others of you on that board, you know, really did everything that they could think of, and talked to every millionaire and every local government, and just did everything that they could do. And I'm glad that I could help, and I hope that you feel good that it's at least nearby. It's not a far drive away. And as I first met with him to talk formally about this, you know, genealogy, it doesn't have any respect or county lines, and love knows no such boundaries, of course, and that's where genealogy comes in. Well, I told Benny I would share a few personal reflections also, in addition to the update, which I'm going to do at the end of the program on the Herring Collection, on some connections, some of my favorite connections, and I'll bring in a little bit of my family history and connections to Duplin. And not to boast in any way, because my people were humble people, but just to let you know how much it means to me. John, if you go to the first slide, this is the library, the main building, which I should have told him a little while ago to go to. But you can go on to the next slide now. Some of you know that I've been long interested in the Palatines, and it wasn't that many years ago I didn't have much knowledge of that at all, and particularly in Duplin County, so I was pretty ignorant. But I felt really good sitting talking to David French over his fried chicken, that 15 years ago a lot of people around New Bern hadn't even heard of Palatines, and that made me feel a lot better. But they are one of my favorite immigration stories of America. They really are. And I've just been fascinated with the story. I'm not going to attempt to tell that story today, but you'll see where I'm going. But as you know, probably in the late 1600s and early 1700s, they were suffering terribly from religious wars in Germany, southern Germany, and then some very hard winters. They made their way down the Rhine River to Amsterdam as refugees, really. Queen Anne became their patron, and she saw them as persecuted Protestants. And she sent ships to get them. And they lived a winter or two in the parks of London, encamped in tents, dependent upon the handouts from citizens to keep from starving. So after a winter or two in the parks of London, you can imagine the conditions there were just awful, the sanitation, and they were, a number of them were sickness and dying and so forth. And we know the Baron von Grafenried came. He was really a fortune-seeking, and he had his Swiss colonists, wanted to do a colony, and he had great debts at that time, which is one reason he left Switzerland. And the Queen made a deal: take some of these Palatines with you as part of our cooperation. And they traveled over here separately. But half the Palatines died on the journey. The journey took twice as long as it should have, blown off course by storms. They landed in Virginia, and then they wouldn't get back on the ship again. It was so long those who survived. And they walked to the New Bern, what is now New Bern area. And our friend John Lawson, who also had real estate, he was there to greet them, and he located them on much inferior land across the river, I understand, swampy land that he owned. And not until the Baron got there did they get that straight, and they were moved to better land, I understand. But then they didn't live on land they owned, and they were tenants. They had to work off their debts. And of course we know the Baron, the Indians ended his life along with John Lawson. No, I'm sorry, the Indians did not end his life, John Lawson. But by the time of the Indian raids, the Baron packed up and left. And his debts were overwhelming, and Thomas Pollock acquired his land and was kind enough for a number of years to allow them to live there. But at his passing, his son kicked them off the land in the dead of winter again, dead of winter. And some of them were able to acquire land. And the next slide, in Craven County. Now this is before they were kicked off their land, and I know you can't see detail, but it's just a wonderful old map, tribute to the Baron that he drew, the Trent River, so forth. And so the New Bern was really just a very small, muddy village, and of course they had their farms, and let me see if my little pointer works. Here we go, get the right button. Here's the Trent River and the confluence here, and they were up and down the river and the creeks and settlements. It's a fascinating map to see and to read close up, of course, but we don't have time for that today. Next map. The Emmanuel Bowen map of 1747, which is a thrill. I was in the North Carolina collection, Chapel Hill, and I walked in a room I had not been in before, and there hanging on the wall was this map, and I had not seen it before. Here is Wilmington and Brunswick Town, the Welch settlement, and then up here it has Palatine settlement between the Northeast and the Cape Fear River. And up here it's labeled Black River. And this whole region, the Duplin Sampson area, that it was actually enough of a concentration in this area where they had, many of them had migrated, in addition to other counties in eastern North Carolina. But I was so thrilled to see that this region here that we're in was labeled on this map as the Palatine settlement. So I immediately sought to get a digital copy of that. And so I bring this up because it's a wonderful story, and I have no genetic connection to the Palatines, but there again, there's a connection with Pender County, between Duplin and Pender, and along with the Teachees and Carnegies and others, were the Moors, another branch of Moors, not English Moors, who migrated down to Moores Creek in what is Pender County, and along with Dennis Moore had passed away senior in New Bern, and his son Dennis Jr. took his mother and relocated, as many did, to find land as they began to find land that they could own. And and I'll touch on that a little bit more. But go on to the next slide. Let's see what we have here. Here we go. But you're going to be disappointed to hear, I'm sure, as many people down where I come from in Burgaw are, that Burgaw does not mean Indian from Mudhole, which everyone does enjoy that story. But I've not been able to find a shred of evidence, and an much older historian, when I came back home, said, "No, Mike, it's not an Indian word at all." He said, "I believe it's a German word." And I said, what? And I never really heard much more from him about it. I couldn't pin him down. And so I've been intrigued for decades, what did he mean by that? And little hints and tips would come to me. One time I was at work and a couple came in and said, "Oh, we just had to come up from Burgaw, we're from Wilmington. And we were in Germany, and we want you to know we spent the night at the Burgaw Motel." I said, "What?" I said, "Is it pronounced that?" He said, "It's pronounced Burgaw, not Burgaw." So I learned about the presence of a town called Burgaw in Germany. And I thought, as the internet developed, I began searching, as we all did, so many of us, and found more. But others become pieces of information. Well, I'm quite convinced, the circumstantial evidence, that that name was given by the Palatines, and it could have been the Teachees or others that lived along this area, Rockfish Creek, that would have naturally explored the waterways below them and around them, and would have gone up Abergel Creek. The word was first applied to Abergel Creek. And why would they have named that creek Burgaw? Because Burgaw in German is a word, Burg, of course, is in many languages for fortress. But the ending in Old German, I've been told and have learned, means a wet meadow or a damp meadow. And at the headwaters of Abergel Creek is what was once called the Big Savannah, which was the largest one in the state of a natural savanna. It was 1,600 acres in size. These are the headwaters of Abergel Creek. This is now the Atlantic, it's labeled Atlantic Coastline Railroad. This is Wallace up here, and of course Burgaw is just a mile or half a mile down this way. And next slide. And here's a rare photo of the Big Savannah, which is now destroyed, but it was in bloom 11 months out of the year, and much studied by botanists and acclaimed with the Venus flytrap and so forth. And sadly, despite efforts to conserve it, nothing was done. They thought it was just a wasteland, no threats, but after World War II, mechanized ditching took care of that, and it was converted to cornfields. Next slide. But a few years ago, I acquired this map. I found it online for sale, and it's a map of southern Germany, and it's from 1710. And it's for sale by a New York City shop. And it is a map of Bavaria, southern Germany. And this is the Rhine River, and this is the Palatine region in here. And these are the principal cities of Bavaria at that time. Munich is one of them, so forth. Next slide. And in the corner is Burgaw, B-U-R-G-A-W, because it is, in present day, it ends with a U rather than a W. But I've also learned that in support of that, what I had been told by some Germans, of a wet meadow, there are multiple Burgaw castles in Germany and Austria. And they're also called the water castle because they're surrounded by moats and lakes and so forth. And it's just a perfect story of geography and history and linguistics of where I believe, I cannot prove this, the word goes back to 1757, I think, or so, in the colonial records, the first recorded and it's been preserved. But I think, sometimes I think the truth is more interesting than fiction. And when there's never been any evidence for any Indian tribe, I don't have evidence, but I have some circumstantial story. And I just love that connection. What I believe is with the Palatines. And next slide. And this is the city of Burgaw, dating from 1640 and part of the original walled town. It's only about 10,000 people, so it's still a small town. Next slide. Which brings us to Dennis Moore, and who located on Moore's Creek, along with his widowed mother, and John Grady, and of course the Battle of Moore's Creek. John Grady of Duplin County, the only Patriot casualty, of course. And can anyone tell me where this monument is in Duplin County? At James Sprung, thank you. I found the photograph online and I was not sure. And so it says, and I'm not sure if that's always been the site of the monument. It has been, okay. But it states that John Grady was born about 10 miles from this spot. And so, but I want to go by and get a better photograph of him when I found it online.
Yeah, it was put there with the Grady outlaw family that used to have their reunions there.
I could read the base of it, and I could see the outlaw, and I saw a dash Grady and outlaw, and I thought that might be the connection. Of course, I know about the connection of the outlaw connections in the family. And to this battle marched a group of Duplin men, including my ancestor, William Taylor, who was a 19-year-old private who had settled in the Magnolia area just east of that, east of town there, around Beasley's Mill, and for several generations, and many past then, Taylors lived, of my branch of Taylors, farming, simple men. And I'm in debt to Charles Ingram too. Our family genealogy, published in 1973, had attributed some things perhaps to William Taylor, which I don't believe now necessarily true. And it just shows you how things that your family takes as, oh yes, because it's in the book. But I learned about, and many of you know about, there were several William Taylors, including one which, an older gentleman who was somewhat more of aristocratic origins. And he probably represented Duplin County in the 5th Provincial Congress in Halifax in November of 1976. He had one child, a daughter, but he was murdered, as many of you might know. And so that is not my William Taylor. But I think more likely he's the one who was a justice of peace, magistrate, which the Taylor book ascribes to mine, and perhaps some other things as well. But the truth is really what we really want to know, you know. And so I'm interested in following that line of research. But my William Taylor served 3 enlistments during the Revolution under Captains Love, Moulton, and Bowden, as many of the other Duplin men did as well. And he and William Ward testified for the accuracy of their testimony in the Revolutionary War pension proceedings in 1832 before Duplin Magistrate John Linton. Next photo. And so we have the Moore's Creek and the Palatines connection. And the next connection is something that got a little bit of fame thanks to L.E. Brown, who's quite persistent in his digging and reporting and his writing when he first learned about my ancestor. And he was trying to write a series of articles regarding Bentonville. And he came to the Dallas Herring Center to meet with someone else. And from that person he learned about my ancestor and started digging. And who was John William Taylor. In 1850, he was the great-grandson of William Taylor, and he married to the Fennell family on Black River in Sampson, what's now Sampson, was New Hanover at that time. And he acquired property on the border of Duplin and what was New Hanover, but now Sampson County, along Bulltail Creek. And for several generations, my family lived there. And as a result of that, he became captain of Company B, Heavy Artillery, which was reported in that article, North Carolina Heavy Artillery. But what is what I love is that in that company, 83 Duplin men served over the course of the war. And 119 from old New Hanover, which I think was mostly southern Sampson and West Pender, served along with them. They served together. And there are only 21 in that company from Sampson County. But Alexander Sprunt, in his Chronicles of Cape Fear, tells a story. There's a story that he publishes of someone who left Point Castle, way down New Hanover County at that time, now Pender, looking to join up with the regiment as the heat of the talk of war was occurring. And he stopped at Harold's store, and there was a big community meeting. And as I said, a fellow named Taylor was talking. They elected him to be captain, but their interest was simply to be a home guard, to protect their property and their families and so forth. And so this person went on to Clinton and joined, and they marched off to Virginia. But a year later, that group of people came together and as Company B, and they did get to stay home for the war at Cape Fear forts, and I'm sure they were able to go home certain times and be connected with their family, but they paid a very heavy price, as we know, at the Battle of Bentonville, and Company B was almost wiped out. Those Duplin and old New Hanover men, one of the worst, the bloodiest parts of the battle, including my ancestor. And as a result of that, I was so pleased the park contacted me, and they've done a small exhibit on John William for the next couple of years, and had his company diary that he got from they got from archives. My dad donated the 100th anniversary of the Civil War, and what the kids love is a lock of his hair, a lock of a dead man's hair, and the bullet that killed him, that was taken, one of the bullets taken from his body, sent back in a letter, and so forth. That. Next slide, please. And across, now we're going to migrate. So I've touched on a few personal connections with Duplin County, with Pender and my roots as well. But across the street from the library is the front porch of what is now Dallas Herring Library. Next slide. And the building has been owned by the county for some 20 years, and every office in the county has almost been there. And it was a lovely old home. It was built in 1900. Just beautiful proportions on that house. Next slide. And it is handicapped accessible, but it was in disrepair, and the county didn't know what to do with it. I think the Office of Tourism was moving out, and things came together. But the moment you walk in, if you didn't see it by the front door of the sign, you know that you're in the presence of Dallas Herring's collection. And they allowed me to take any furnishings or anything from the house. Working with Sonny and Horace was so good without their support. So the front room is really dedicated, the front two rooms, to his honor and memory. And we have proclamations and so forth on display there. Next slide. And on the mantle, a notebook that he or others had put together of photographs of the house at Herring's Hearth in Rose Hill, right there for anyone to look through. Next slide. We have lockers. I letting North Carolina Archives sort of be my standard of security. I want there to be strong security, and so we discourage people from taking bags, so forth, in the back, and we have lockers with keys so they can put their things away. Along the top are some bottles I found in the house. They were in a window. Sonny didn't even know about them. And they were created during the bicentennial. I haven't been able to find them on eBay or anywhere else, but they're commemorative bottles. One is to Morris Creek, Halifax Resolves, and the Mecklenburg Declaration, so forth. But great place to put them. Next slide. And in what is the dining room furniture, which is like a conference room, we have a case of things which you don't really want to put on the shelf about Dr. Herring. Some very important dissertations about him and some honors. The medals and cups, and so forth, and he won. His interview with Bill Friday, his picture of him with Bill Friday up there. Next slide. Oh, before you do that, on the right there, you can't really see. I tried to take close-up pictures, but they wouldn't really duplicate. There were some little sketches, and our county attorney was in the legislature and doing some lobbying, and he was in the office of someone from Mecklenburg County or someone. And an elderly lady, in fact, she was in her 90s, and she was a secretary, part-time secretary, and she said, "Oh, Dr. Herring, I worked for Dr. Herring with the State Board of Education, and whenever he'd go into the conference room, I said, I kept little pads of paper and sharp pencils for him, and he would pick those up and he would doodle during the meetings, and sometimes he would say, here's my doodles, and I've got the best ones I've framed, and so I want to give them to you all." And so we have those hanging there, so sweet. Next slide. Also, James Sprott and Thomas Carter portrait hanging in the same room there. Next slide. And a man who was his inspiration in Dallas, I believe, put this together, Walter Hines Page. His essays of the Forgotten Man, which inspired the brilliance of the community college system in North Carolina, with Dallas as the father of the community college system in our state. And next slide. We have throughout the building this wonderful exhibition system where we can change out exhibits. These slide on these rails with little hangers which go up and down. So we can constantly change things without drilling more holes in the wall and everything. And several $1,000s we put together, and in 2 phases we've outfitted the building. Next. And also on the other side of the main hallway, this is where the Duplin County footnotes are housed, the main hall, along with the North Carolina Historical Bulletin there. And number of sets, next slide. Number of sets were huge reference sets to the Civil War. This is Dr. Herring's The War of the Rebellion. But in honor, when we opened the collection, we purchased these 2 sets from Tom Broadfoot's publishing house, which is a listing of every single Union and Confederate soldier that fought the war, including the African American soldiers, which is a great handy reference source for helping people now to find out what regiment, what state they might be listed. So whether it's North Carolina, Confederate or Union, we can help them and direct them with that. Next slide. We have 3 rooms in which the book collection is distributed. And this is the genealogy room, and this is on the doorpost by that room. Okay. Next slide. And we have study tables throughout the building, and there again this exhibit system. Next slide. And I've ordered these little shelves that pull out. So when you're in the stacks there and you see something, you can just pull a shelf out. You want to stand there and go through and make sure. Little handy touches. Next slide. There again, exhibits that we have currently going on right now. Next slide. We have the county room, and also we've maintained his legacy of the African American History Collection, which we're growing, and it's very important to us as well. We're seeking all the time, and we like to find out tips for that. But we are using a cataloging system because Dr. Herring had his own system. The problem was that as it outgrew the shelves, it became a little difficult, so he had to stash some things in other places, but he knew where everything was. And because the call number was the unit and then the shelf number, of course. But the system we're using is used by Rowan County, and it's the only other library in the state using it. They found it in Texas. And the New Hanover County told me that if they could recatalog everything, that this is what they would use. So basically, we recataloged our own collection and Dr. Herring's collection. And it's a genealogy-based system. So it's things are pulled together by region, And so you'll have, for for Duplin County, you have all your Duplin County records in one place, whereas Dewey Decimal is going to scatter it throughout. So it's quite handy. Next slide. And of course, our copy room. We also have a scanner. Copies are 10 cents, but the scanning is free, and you're welcome to use those. Next slide. This is the workroom, one section of the workroom. It was the kitchen of the house. And these cabinets is where we put smaller special collections. Next slide. This is the main research room. And from my angle there, it looks like it's narrow. But we have public access computers and tables, reading areas. And of course we have, go ahead, next slide. We've got some other shots. Periodicals, the footnotes was here, and the periodicals from other historical societies in the region. Okay. Another shot, some of the artwork that Dr. Herring did. And I'll tell you, I've heard he did one on Blackbeard. Didn't he have a Blackbeard plaster of Paris? I've been told.
It's something I can't remember.
And I would love to acquire one of those. If anyone has one, ever wants to give up a treasure, we'd love to have that. Billy McCatherine down at the end, who he so admired, and named his library after. Next slide. And we have a room where we have Dr. Herring's files, and we have our own Pender files, L.E. Brown's vertical files, and also his index cards, and a new collection of Claude Moore files. Claude Moore from Turkey, Sampson County. Bob Townsend was so great, came and did a nice long story on the new Heritage Center. And Claude Moore's widow called me. And I said, I've been looking for that collection for a long time. I'd been to the Sampson County Museum hoping to find it, and they didn't have it. They had, of course, the cabin and other buildings and artifacts, but not his files. And I'd heard that, that she wouldn't allow anyone to go to them. And she said, I've not allowed anyone to touch them, because people would take things. And so she protected them. And while he was not the scholar that Dallas was, he was a great storyteller, and his columns, of course, are very interesting to read. But his files are rich with 19th century photographs and genealogies people shared. I was amazing what people had given him. Photographs of various families. And I'm going through that personally myself right now. My good friend here, John Bell, has taken on some of Dr. Herring's files and has really enjoyed that. And we're creating some new files, subdividing some files. We'll find things in files under a certain family name, but there are other things that maybe that person gave him, and so we're putting them under the surname of what that might be about. He knew where it was, but it's like we're finding things, that maybe other people wouldn't find them that way. So we're trying to, and we'll be doing a list of the name of the files, and we'll have that on the internet as well. Next slide. We're getting close to him. And Leslie Brown, his index card file, it's just a wonderful tool, and as well as his vertical files. And we're looking into having those digitized by the North Carolina Heritage Center. And I do think digitizing is wonderful. It provides access. But we want to have a reason for people to come. And we've had people from about 15 states so far to come. Next slide. And we've got a portrait that came of Claude Moore, and there's a closer. Here's our scanning equipment. Billy McCatherine. Her son, Ted, has redone all of her genealogies, updated them all. Every one of them has been replaced with new additions the last year or two. Next slide. And we're cataloging, of course, everything. We have a catalog station. It's online. You can search the catalog. But we're also still receiving, and I have brought a bibliography of a selection of the books that we've added to the collection since we opened. And it's on the table over here in the corner. And I hope you'll get a copy of that. It's some 40, as many as I can get on the page. It's not everything that we've added, but the point is that this collection is growing and thriving, and with the support of folks like you and others as we network, you know, to get those copies of genealogies and work that people are doing, you know, to share those. So it's not locked away in the drawer somewhere, but it's available to other people. So important. Next slide. These are some Leslie Brown's, and I'm hoping that I can. They're fragile. They're very complicated to scan. They need to be preserved. I've had people who've discovered them and found some great treasures in them. And I'm hoping that the Heritage Center will scan these, because you'll turn a page and you have to fold out something, you know, for example. But concerned about the future of those. This is just an example. It may be articles pasted in there, or it may be typewritten pages. Next slide. And then programs. That's been a great thing that we're able to do. We have a meeting room across the street, the seats 100. And in June, the old New Hanover Genealogical Society came, and Dr. John Bell right here presented the program. Very great, good program. And they had a picnic on the grounds, and helping to get the word out, and we're finding more and more ways to do that. And I appreciate so much your website, having that link on your website and a picture of the house as well. Next slide. And people ask, oh, I want to make a gift, but I want it to go to Dr. Herring's collection. I don't want it to go for children's books in the library. And the Friends of the Library has a special fund which rolls over from year to year. And it's an active fund, and we receive gifts all the time. And they are tax exempt, and we're purchasing what we can't have donated for us. So it's alive and well. Any questions anyone might have?
What is this collection open?
Well, right now we're still open. We're open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're open from 10 until 5 on Thursday and Friday. And on Saturdays we're open from 10 to 2. Now we're also open if people will call ahead to make an appointment. And I tell you, we're open. We haven't turned away anyone from out of state or out of the region that's come down. We found a way to go across the street, or they've been there to find something specific, and we'll bring it across the street. But we don't have enough staff. But it's worked out well. I don't think we've not had anyone to leave, but we do ask people to try to come when we're open, if they can. But we have a group coming from Kentucky in September, I think. And that's going to be on a Monday. So we're going to let them be there as long as they need to be there.
Is that about the Carter painting?
Yeah. So, yes.
When do you think it'll be his collection will be fully accessioned, and all the family names will be searchable?
Well, the book collection is all cataloged. They're all in the catalog right now.
But did he have a lot of vertical files?
There are 4 filing cabinets, and Claude Moore had 4 filing cabinets, so we've had a lot of new material to come in. And I don't think we're very far from starting. In fact, we've already started getting the listing of the vertical files. And that'll be a pretty simple process. So we're not far off for Dr. Herring's collection like that. Well, I have really appreciated this opportunity, and thank you so much for your interest and your continuing support in what we do. And it's just a great thing. Thank you all.